In the world of Harry Potter fandom, there are a lot of people who persist in hating Severus Snape and believing that he was a profoundly evil person, even though later revelations prove that he was ultimately sort of a good guy on the right side. Now, when it comes to Snape's cruelty toward students, it's important to remember that none of those bullying things that he did actually had any lasting effect. It didn't destroy anyone's academic career. It didn't destroy their life. It may have made them temporarily miserable, but ultimately there were no lasting effects that we know of from any of Snape's bad behavior. You know, there are a lot of things I think about from my past life when I was a lot younger that at the time they seemed really bad. But as I've gotten older and gained more perspective, things that seemed bad at the time really don't seem so bad anymore because they haven't had a lasting effect on my life. With regard to bad teachers, I did have some bad teachers. I did have some teachers who acted like bullies, but nothing that they did really affected my subsequent life. So in retrospect, it's kind of a minor thing. And there are a lot of other things like that I can think of that when I was that age it seemed really bad, but with the years and the maturity it doesn't seem nearly as bad. Now, we didn't do this at school because there could have been serious consequences from that, but you know, if you met someone for a fist fight or something and you got your lights knocked out, well, the worst part of that actually was embarrassment. It was embarrassing for that to happen, and I both gave those and got them. And that was really embarrassing. But the thing about it is we were actually decent enough to help each other in that situation because though we may have been mad, we didn't really want to do serious damage to another person. So when that happened, we would help each other. And as I said, that went both ways with me. And even if there are people who wouldn't let you forget that embarrassment at the time, well, eventually you got out of school and got away from those people and it wasn't an issue anymore. And later on it became kind of a funny story. And in a couple of cases, I actually became friends with a couple of those people and were actually able to laugh about it later. It really was kind of funny, and there wasn't any lasting damage from it, even though it was highly embarrassing at the time, and that really was the worst part. You know, you'd have a sore head for a day or two, but the embarrassment of a knockout was actually the worst part. And like I said, I gave them and got them both. I don't tell everyone that, but I do tell some people, and it's not nearly as embarrassing as it was then. Now it's just kind of funny, and so it is with a lot of things. And also, bad teachers didn't have that much of an effect. Was Snape really a bad guy? Well, when he was in school as a student, he was tormented in pretty bad ways by James Potter and Sirius Black, and that was actually worse, I think, than anything I ever saw during my school years. So their torment of Snape really went over the line, so you could say that in a sense he was justified in holding some long-term resentment from that because he was truly thoroughly embarrassed by James and Sirius and made fun of and kind of an outcast, and as a result of that he became a Death Eater. Now, there was the incident where Sybil Trelawney gave Albus Dumbledore some of the information, the prophecy about what was going to happen with Harry Potter and Voldemort later, and Snape was in fact listening at the door. And he gave some of that information to Voldemort, but he didn't give all of it because he didn't hear the entire prophecy. He was thrown out. And nothing he did in that regard was intentional as far as any harm coming to James and Lily Potter or Harry. He did not want them harmed or killed or anything. And his responsibility for that is no more than Horace Slughorn's responsibility was. You might remember Horace Slughorn was the one who told Tom Riddle about the Horcruxes, and when he did that, he had no idea what the consequences were going to be. Slughorn didn't. And so it was with Snape in passing part of that prophecy to Voldemort. Of course, Snape had been in love with Lily Potter, and James had been kind of an enemy, and so when then Lily married James, there was a lot of resentment because Snape lost the love of his life. She was, in fact, the only love of his life that we know of. And so there was resentment because of that. But once Voldemort had killed the Potters, actually before Voldemort killed the Potters, Snape was converted to the right side. He went to Dumbledore and converted to be a spy for the Order of the Phoenix, and Dumbledore hired him on the faculty, and he spent his entire career at Hogwarts battling Voldemort. Now, in so doing, he had to play the bad guy. He had to pretend to be a bad guy. That's what Voldemort would have expected, because Voldemort was the ultimate bad guy. And so he did play this bad guy role, but he was kind of forced into it as he was a spy for the Order of the Phoenix. As is revealed in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, he risked his life many times to protect Harry Potter. He risked his life to protect Harry. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, he actually intervenes to stop Quirrell from killing Harry. Now, it's kind of stated that he did this because he didn't want to be in debt to James Potter, who had saved his life, but I think there was a kernel of morality there, that he wasn't going to let an innocent student be killed by Quirrell. Later on, in The Prisoner of Azkaban, you see where Sirius Black is known to have broken into Hogwarts Castle. He was actually looking for Peter Pettigrew, and they put all the students in the Great Hall, and Snape said, what about Potter? Shouldn't he be warned? He was thinking that Harry possibly should be warned of the danger. Then, later on, when Remus Lupin transformed into a werewolf, it was Snape who jumped in front of those three students to shield them. In the Order of the Phoenix, he actually did try to get past his resentment of James Potter to teach Harry occlumency. It was hard for him, but he did try. He made the effort for a period of time, and he only backed out of that once he became thoroughly embarrassed. So, he was doing a lot to protect Harry and protect the students, in spite of the fact that he was overtly cruel to them. But as I have pointed out, that cruelty didn't really have any lasting effects. He was playing a role, and a role that maybe he really didn't even want to play. And so he was actually Dumbledore's man. Harry tells Voldemort at the final battle that Snape was always Dumbledore's man. And in fact, Dumbledore trusted Snape to such an extent that he actually intended Snape to get the Elder Wand. So Dumbledore must have thought pretty well of Snape, actually. They conspired together against Voldemort. And he later told Snape that you must be the one to kill me. It has to be that way in order for things to work out. And Snape did so. Dumbledore had also trusted Snape to tell Harry the truth. He told him there will come a time when Harry Potter must be told something. Snape says, what? And then Harry Potter explains his theory that Harry must die. Now, I'll never forget the shock that Snape experienced on hearing that. And it's especially evident in the movie that Snape was very shocked that Harry was going to have to die. He was a little bit upset about that. And a lot of it had to do with his previous love for Lily, but, Harry was Lily's son, and Snape was genuinely shocked that Harry was going to have to possibly die. He was also the one who was responsible for sending the Patronus to Harry in Deathly Hallows Part 1 so that Harry could find the Sword of Gryffindor. That was Snape. That was Snape's Patronus at that pond, showing Harry where the Sword of Gryffindor actually was. And then, of course, Snape ultimately gives his life to try to save the Wizarding World. And 19 years later, at the end of the original saga, you see that Harry has named his son Albus Severus Potter. He said Snape was the bravest man he's ever known. See, Albus was upset about being in Slytherin, and Harry said, Albus Severus Potter, you were named after 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I've ever known. Snape's true heroism comes to light in a bigger and better way in the stage play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, in which Scorpius Malfoy and Albus Potter go back in time to try to save Cedric Diggory. Of course, they mess it up so bad that Harry dies in that alternate past, and there is no Albus, and Scorpius has to try to go back and fix it again. And the person that Scorpius relies on to help him is Severus Snape. It's Severus Snape who's going to help Scorpius set everything right, even though it's going to mean his own death. Snape is going to die in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child in order to set things right. And in the course of their discussion, Scorpius Malfoy tells Severus Snape that Harry named his son after him, and he said, Harry considered you to be a great man. And when he first met him, Scorpius Malfoy said what an honor it was to meet Severus Snape, and Snape was genuinely moved by the fact that Harry had named his son after him. And then, of course, Snape does give his life once again. So you see that Snape was a loyal warrior in the fight against Voldemort. He was a spy for the Order of the Phoenix. He was in the battle on the right side. He ultimately gave his life not only once but twice in order to set everything right. And Harry developed tremendous respect for him. That's why he named his son Albus Severus Potter. You don't name a child after someone if you thoroughly hate them and disrespect them. Now, the question has often been raised, did Snape care for Harry? In the beginning, he didn't. In the beginning, he didn't like him at all. And that just continued for a very long time. But you see, when we get to the Deathly Hallows, that he is upset and shocked that Harry is going to have to die. So you put all this together, all the subtle clues throughout the first 7 books, and then the final picture that we have of Snape in the 8th book, and it turns out that Snape actually was a good guy. He was forced to play the bad guy because Voldemort believed he was a Death Eater. Voldemort believed that Snape was on his side, and Voldemort was a very evil person. And so Voldemort wouldn't trust someone who was nice and kind to people because Voldemort had no kindness whatsoever. So whether he wanted to or not, he had to play the bad guy. And there's that scene in the Half-Blood Prince where Snape approaches Dumbledore and says, has it ever occurred to you, to your brilliant mind, that I don't want to do this anymore? That he's sick of playing the bad guy, that he didn't want to do this anymore. And Dumbledore said, we're not going to make a deal. You agreed, that's the end of it. And Snape ultimately fulfills his end of the bargain. So, yes, he did demonstrate meanness and cruelty toward students, but that was role-playing, and it did not have a long-term effect on the students after, Hogwarts, or it didn't ruin their academic careers. And he ultimately did the right thing. He paid the ultimate price. And as I just illustrated at the beginning of this message, there are a lot of things in my past that seem really bad at the time, but in later years, they didn't seem so bad at all. In fact, some of them seem downright funny. So there you have it, my defense of Severus Snape, who, like it or not, ultimately was very courageous, and he was kind of a good guy. And that's just the fact of the matter.